Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, my 52nd podcast and number 13 in my second season. I'm so happy that you're joining me for this great conversation. I met today's guest when he was a freshman at Vandercook College of Music. He impressed me then, and he impresses me today, as he serves as the director of bands at Pittsburg State University in Pittsburg, Kansas. He's Dr. Andrew Chybowski, and he is one of those rare students who could flip a switch and go from fun and games to all business just like that. You're going to get a chance to meet Dr. Chybowski in just a few minutes.
Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends is made possible through the generous support of the Eastman Music Company. From the first student instrument to the professional heirloom, Eastman Music Company is committed to crafting the finest instruments for musicians throughout the world. For more information, visit eastmanwinds.com.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm an avid golfer. And although I'm not as good as I really want to be, of course none of us are, I believe I'm addicted to the game. I simply love it. And I think I could play 36 holes or more every day and never get tired of it. And this past weekend, I had the opportunity to watch Phil Mickelson at age 50, almost 51, win one of 4 major golf tournaments that is held each year. He won the PGA, and he became the oldest golfer ever to win a major golf tournament. And as I've been reading about his victory, the preparation that led up to the tournament and some of the things he was focusing on, especially with the help of his caddy, I just realized that there are so many parallels between playing golf and music making. You know, such things as keep your mind quiet and visualize the shot and commit to the swing. And as I've been thinking about this, I realized that process to playing great golf and making great music aren't all that different. Both take time to get to a level where you can enjoy playing. Both require a finely tuned skill set. Both require endless practice. And both require a belief in your own abilities. You know, when you visualize the shot, it's nothing more than hearing the sound in your ear before you play it, or hearing the sound of the ensemble before you begin to conduct or rehearse the work. Having a mental image of what you want it to look like or sound like is the same thing. And then committing to the swing. That's simply believing in your decisions, not second-guessing yourself. If you have thought it through, you can envision what you want. Then just go ahead and swing, or in our case, play. Certainly the same holds true for baseball, football, soccer, basketball, heck, even the latest craze, pickleball. Going through the motions may allow you to participate, but to really be good at something, it requires a vision and it requires a commitment. As you head into the summer, whether you're a student, a young teacher, a seasoned veteran, or if you're retired, it really doesn't matter. Find something where you want to do your best, where you want to get better, and make a concerted effort to envision how you want to perform and what that performance looks like. Then commit to the course of action you feel is best and let her rip. And when it doesn't go the way you want, just regroup and give it another go. That's where the fun is. That's what the chase is all about. To really understand that, all you need to do is look at a dog chasing a ball. That dog has the most fun when he's chasing it. When he grabs it, game's over, and he comes back in hopes that you will throw it again. So whether you're a sportsman, a musician, a quilt maker, or cook, envision the goal and commit to the process. You'll be amazed at the results. We'll be right back with Dr. Andrew Chybowski.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast.
So I just finished recording the interface video with Braden, the what is it, why is it cool, and why do I need one? Well, part of that project was I wanted to try out a new piece of gear that I just got, and that's the Rode Wireless Go 2. And so it's a wireless transmitter and receiver system that can connect into your computer or your smartphone pretty seamlessly. The really cool thing about this is that it can record each channel independently. One mic is going into the left channel and the other one is going into the right channel. You can also control the input level from Audacity when you're connecting in to the computer through the USB-C. The initial return on it is it did everything that I wanted it to. It allowed camera placement.
To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, it's probably been 100 years since I've had an opportunity to chat with this young man. I was always impressed with him during his undergraduate days when he was a student at Vandercook College of Music, and I've followed him from afar, and he's really done terrific things. And he's a focused kid that is very talented, comes off a little shy sometimes, but he doesn't miss a trick. He's one of those people that absorbs things like a sponge and has one of the greatest senses of humor I've ever been around. So it is really an honor for this old man to get a chance to have an opportunity to chat with now Dr. Andrew Chybowski, who is the director of bands at Pittsburg State University in Pittsburg, Kansas. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. And, you call me Dr. Chybowski. I think I just got to still keep on calling you Dr. Mangini, because that's how I've known you for years. And I think we'll just stick with that one, if that's okay with you.
Well, you call me whatever you want. I'm sure that when I wasn't around, you guys called me a whole bunch of things, but that's okay. That's a whole nother time and place. And that's okay. Andrew, when we first met, you came to Vandercook College of Music as a freshman and you earned your bachelor of music education degree there. But tell the listeners where you grew up and how you got into music.
Yeah, it's been kind of a winding road, really, and I've had a lot of different kinds of musical experiences. And, to me now, looking back on them, it seems like the perfect combination of experiences, just because of the way things lined up. I'm from Wisconsin. I remember I started band. I picked out a saxophone when I was in 5th grade in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And, I had probably the best beginning band experience I could imagine. And I'm going to name some names here, but my beginning band director, his name was Mr. Booth. I don't know where he is now, but Mr. Booth, when we had our first concert and our first beginning band concert, he rented lasers, he rented fog machines, and he made it into a big production and a show. And we thought we were so cool. We got to bring sunglasses, and I still remember that to this day. In fact, I remember the music that we played on that concert. So that definitely made an impression. So I think right off the bat, I fell in love with the activity more than anything else.
So you said you had sunglasses and a laser show and a fog machine and all those cool things.
Oh yeah, that was the pinnacle right there. It's just kind of been downhill from there, but that was a great experience there.
Doesn't get any better than that, does it?
Sure doesn't.
Well, Andrew, thanks for being with us today. And no, we're just getting started here. Wow, that's really something. That's really something. So what made you want to go into music ed?
Yeah, so I honestly, I would say, I had some really great experiences, like I said early on. None of my schools were what I would say high performance bands. We didn't go to competitions, we didn't do that kind of thing. But I remember the experience and just kind of the community. So a little bit later on, we moved to Green Bay, and my band director, Mr. Barker, we had the best band experience there. We felt like a family. Of course, we were welcome in the band hall all times of the day. But it was just the experience that I remember, and I think even to this day. That's one of the things that I want to create for my students is that experience of just, the community, the culture, the camaraderie, those kinds of things. A little bit later on, I moved in the middle of my sophomore year. We moved down to Lindenhurst, Illinois, which is basically on the Wisconsin border, kind of halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee. And I moved because I didn't know anybody there. So my mom said, "Do you want to maybe take some saxophone lessons?" And I said, "Sure." I'd never really been very serious. It just so happened that the saxophone teacher in my area was named James Kasperzik. So I started taking saxophone lessons there, and that's kind of when I started to put some serious, music practice to my fun experience there. And of course, you remember James Kasperzik, and that was a good part of the reason why I came to Vandercook as well.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that story. So when you were going to high school in Green Bay, were you a Packer fan or were you a Bear fan once you moved to Illinois?
Absolutely not. No. I'm a Packers fan. Have been all the time. It's a little bit hard with the current drama going on right now, but we don't need to get into that on this podcast.
Oh man, Aaron Rodgers. He's got that whole state spinning right now, doesn't he?
Holy cow.
It's pretty tough to make a decision when you're only making $130 million or something ridiculous like that. Kind of like college band director salaries, right?
Oh yeah. We're living the dream here.
Well, Andrew, when you were an undergrad, you were one of those kids, like I said in the introduction, you took in every word, man. And you always had one of the greatest senses of humor of anyone I've ever met. So what do you remember from your days at Vandercook?
Well, it was an interesting time, kind of a different time, thinking back on it, for those of our listeners that don't know Vandercook, you might not be able to picture kind of just the atmosphere. And it was, to me, looking back, it was the perfect atmosphere to study music education. It was just a tight knit family where, everyone kind of looked out for everyone else. And, but it was kind of a different time. And I remember myself, I kind of like to think that, I'm really good at failing. I try a lot of things and I fail, and I try to fail a little bit less each day. And that sounds like a negative thing, but actually, the more experience I get, the less of a bad thing that is. But I think I tried a lot of things, and I think I learned a lot. Like you said, I even now that I'm kind of in the position of, working with music education majors, I take a lot of that experience with me, and I kind of surprised myself how much I kind of brought from that experience there. But yeah, it was a different time. I loved it. I haven't been back since. There's another building over there where I've never had a chance to see yet. I'm looking forward to seeing that at some point.
Well, I remember when you were there, one of your claims to fame, and you had many, by the way, you were a great player, and you had your saxophone quartet that you were in was fantastic, but you had this underground newsletter that you started. It was called Das News, if you remember that.
Yeah, speaking of trying things.
And we had played Lincoln Portrait, and our admissions director, George Perard, did the narration. And the only thing I remember is the next day you came out with this edition about the band playing Lincoln Portrait, it was whatever it was. And that's what George Perard said. I mean, what's your recollection of all that? Who you're collaborating with when you were doing that?
It was... I definitely remember that. I remember the experience. And it was Lincoln Portrait, and George Perard had the narrator part, and I just remember a hand-drawn cartoon with George Perard with the Abraham Lincoln hat, and I don't to this day know what I was thinking, and I don't know that much thought went into it, but by golly, I did it, and I hope, just for my own amusement, so I hope that it's still in an archive somewhere that we can go and find Das News up there, which was the title. Actually, you'd be probably amused to know, actually, right now at Pittsburg State University, I'm actually the person who is in charge of the newsletter, the department newsletter, which not as many hand-drawn cartoons, but maybe something stuck there.
That's great. Good for you. Well, you graduated from Vandercook, and then you went to Missouri State University, where you worked with Jerry Hoover and Belva Prather, and I'm sure some other folks. But talk about the change in going from Vandercook to Missouri State, and share some memories, if you can, about working with Mr. Hoover and Dr. Prather, because those are two very special people.
Absolutely. Just talk about it, another in the line of great mentors, both of them in very different and unique ways. If you know either one of them, they're very passionate and very unique in their styles, and somehow they made it work as a team together. But just, I think, again, going back to the music education thing, I think, like Vandercook was just such a great hands-on experience. I think Missouri State it felt like a graduate school continuation of a lot of the things that were being done at Vandercook at the time. It was very hands-on, it was very practical, and I think it was just a great experience. of course, Belva Prather is just a fantastic mentor, an absolute professional musician, and has her own dry sense of humor, which is very different than Jerry Hoover's sense of humor, which is, very, I can't even describe it. He's a one of a kind character. I think one of the things I learned most from Mr. Hoover is just the culture thing, that it's hard to teach, it's hard to describe, but he just created a culture. And I remember him telling us when we went to visit schools, and he visited schools all the time, one of the first things he did when he went to a new school is he would sit down, he'd make sure he got there about 10 minutes before the class was set to start. He would sit down in a corner and just crumple up a piece of paper and put it on the floor in front of him, just kind of watch. And he'd notice, and his little litmus test was, would a student come by and pick up that piece of paper and throw it away, just to kind of like do a little check of their culture. And I think that's one of the things that was really important to him is culture. And he by golly made sure that his bands were unified, and we never walked alone when we were walking at night. We always were together and always representing the program well. So I think that's one of the most important things I learned from Mr. Hoover.
I student taught with Mr. Hoover.
I know that, and I heard a couple of stories too. I think
those stories are lies, by the way. Let me tell you that those stories are lies. But the very first day I show up for my student teaching, there's a note on the door, and it says, "Charlie, they're all yours, Hoove." And he was off doing a jazz clinic somewhere, and I was like a student teacher on the first day, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. So
just got thrown right in the deep end there.
That's great. That's great. So you graduated from Missouri State, and then what was the next step? Did you go teach high school, or did you go right for your doctorate?
No, I always feel like I want to apply what I know, right? So I went. That's when I found a job, just kind of through happenstance. I found a job in Texas, I got a great middle school job in East Texas, out in the pine trees there. And I taught for several years out in Texas, and that was, a great opportunity as well. It's kind of another in those chain of just kind of things that kind of make you form your outlook and everything. So I taught middle school band in Palestine, Texas, which is kind of out in rural East Texas there. But it was a great band program, and I had the opportunity to work as a team and kind of learn the Texas thing, which is way different than what I experienced up in Wisconsin. It's kind of its own thing, and I'm really glad I got that experience there.
Yeah, Texas is a whole nother country down there, man. And they play for keeps. They play for keeps down there.
Oh, it's for real, definitely. And it was a really good experience. And I kind of came in, I taught middle school there, and the high school band director was someone named Sean Murphy, and he was a great mentor in kind of bringing me into the Texas culture. And he kind of showed me where the traps were and showed me the way a little bit. And then when he moved on, I became the head director at the high school and kind of was able to apply to some of that stuff. So yeah, it was a great experience in just another kind of a culture. A lot of different ways of life down there in Texas, but it was, I think, a very positive time.
And then you decided to get a doctorate degree. And what made you choose Indiana?
Honestly, Indiana was one of the schools that I really fell in love with going to campus, and it was just meeting the faculty and talking to the other grad students. I said, all right, this is a place that has the right kind of culture, right kind of approach. Of course, high level of performance, and I get to work with some of the great musicians in the country, great college musicians in the country, and that was always a plus. And I kind of felt called to maybe kind of challenge myself to grow musically, but again, it's kind of a culture thing. In the band department there, I met Stephen Pratt and the other band directors, and of course the other graduate students there, and it definitely felt like a really good culture, and I think that's kind of been a common theme in my career. I kind of seek out those experiences where the culture is, it feels right. It feels like they're doing things the right way, I guess, if that makes sense. And Steve, it was another great experience.
Yeah, and Steve Pratt's a great human being. I mean, he's just a terrific A+ person. I mean, you're not going to find a better person than Steve Pratt.
That's what it comes down to. Consummate professional, fantastic human being, and yeah, absolutely.
That's all. So from Indiana, then you got the job at Pitt State?
Yeah, and then this is I'm finishing up my 4th year at Pitt State, and
fourth year already.
Yes, it seems like it's been a blink of an eye, but it's I just did the math.
Man, that's fantastic. Well, at Pitt State, you followed a good friend of mine Craig Fuchs, who's now Dean of the Honors College or Director of the Honors College or something like that. I trust the two of you have shared some stories and had a couple of beers since you've been there.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's been great. You know, it's kind of an ideal situation. Whenever you take over a new job, it's always great when you can kind of have your predecessor to talk to and kind of like tell you, you know, some of the things, some of the ways of the program and some of the things that they've done over the years. And Craig's been just that. You know, he's been someone to talk to, kind of talk to me about where he brought things and some of the things that he's been able to accomplish for the program, and just kind of someone to ask questions, you know, when I need something. Who do I talk to about this? Where is this music, kind of a thing. Yeah, so Craig's been great.
So, and what's been your biggest surprise since you started at Pitt State, or teaching college for that matter?
Well, yeah, exactly. This is my first college gig, and I kind of compare it to, you know, when you're in band in high school, you're a player, and then when you become a teacher, you have kind of a shift of focus. Your job is then to kind of help bring students along and help improve their playing, and it's been kind of a similar shift of focus for me. You know, so I've been teaching out several years. I've gone through a couple of degrees, and now my focus is on creating that for our music education students, especially creating those experiences, making sure that they're prepared to go out and be successful and to do well. And you know, it's been a blast, because I feel like this is like where everything is lined up from my experience as a student to all the great mentors I've had, yourself included, to my teaching experience. It feels like I've been very well prepared, and it's you know, I think it's a great fit. And of course, like, the faculty are really tight knit here. We work as a team, and similar to Vandercook, you know, it's a small music education program, but it's a tight knit community, and our students are well prepared with a lot of good practical experience. And you know, it's great to go out and see them have success. We just had another crop of students graduate, and they all have jobs, and it's going to be great to watch them go out and kind of create their own experiences.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned, you know, Pitt State has always had a reputation as being a terrific teachers college, and I'm sure most all the music majors are probably on that music education track. And you got, like you said, your experiences at Vandercook and Missouri State and Indiana and teaching. I mean, you got a whole bunch of experiences that you're able to offer those young men and women, and that's fantastic. So as you look back, what are some of those tricks or tips that you learned along the way that you've put into Andrew's bag of tricks?
Well, I think one of the hardest lessons I learned early on as a teacher is to not try to make your success look like another teacher's success. In other words, you know, if you go to those teachers that are really good at what they do, and you can see that their bands sound great and they always have success, you might not necessarily be able to be successful in the same way, either if they're really, let's say if they're really strict, or if they're really loose, you know, or if they're, you know, whatever the case may be. So I guess to thine own self be true is a really important lesson I had to learn, you know, over time, that just by copying what you see from other teachers is not going to guarantee success. Maybe thinking about what their goals are and what they're trying to do for their students might be a better model for success. So that's one of the first lessons I learned. And I learned it the hard way. I tried to copy what I saw the teachers do, and it didn't feel right, didn't quite fit. And so I had to learn, all right, this is the way I'm going to do things. And I kind of set some goals for my students that I thought were important. And then I had better success that way, just being a little bit more authentic to what I thought was important. One of the other things I learned, and I'm still kind of struggling with this conundrum, is to balance like pedagogy and having great musical experiences. Because I think you can go too far either way on that spectrum. I think, you know, we don't ever want to get in a situation where we're going day after day and we're just correcting wrong notes, and we're, you know, just getting things in alignment and with no real end in sight. So to the student, it just becomes a chore, right? You go in and you hope you don't get yelled at. Of course, we can experience the other side too, where we're just talking about the sunset, but we never tell them whether or not they should play louder or softer, you know, something like that. So I think one of the other things that I've learned and that I try to help my students learn is to find a balance and to make sure that whenever there's something that you teach the students, that there's a musical thing you can apply it to. And you can do that every day, even just during rehearsals. You know, you fix something and then you kind of have a musical moment, or you have a little payoff there. And I think that helps the students, the band members, that helps them kind of grow step by step. They have little successes that they kind of start to accumulate.
That's great. I mean, there's the two things you bring up there. You know, the first one is, yeah, you got to find your voice as a teacher, and God bless you for doing it at such a young age, man. I mean, you're still a young guy. You're what, in your 30s probably, right?
That's right.
I mean, yeah. So, you found knowing that you've got to find your voice, that's fantastic. And that whole balance of pedagogy and musical experiences. And I have to compliment you. I did some research on you. I went to your website, and you got a wonderful little video that you put together. That's kind of a little thing about you and Pitt State, and shows some excerpts of you rehearsing. And that is an absolutely beautiful example, Andrew, of that balance of talking them through what they have to do and explaining the music to them and letting it happen. I thought that was really, really well done. So bravo to you, man.
Absolutely. That's those little videos, by the way, that's kind of like one of the things that we've done this last year, just to kind of like reach out into the darkness, make those connections, because we're not able to get out into schools. We're not able to kind of go to a convention and actually shake someone's hand and say, hi, I'm Dr. Chybowski. What's your name? That's, those little things are just kind of like, that's kind of how we had to survive this past year. And it's been interesting, and it's definitely been instructive.
So as you look at now, you said you finished 4 years, and now you've kind of know which key opens which door, and you're getting a little bit more comfortable with the area and the students that you have. What do you want that music education student who graduates from Pitt State to look like?
Yeah, you never know. First of all, you never know where the opportunity is going to lie. So I would like our students to go out and be prepared to teach in any situation, whether that be in a big program where you're maybe one of 3 directors, or if you're like my wife, she just had her final concert last night. She's the music lady in her district, so she teaches middle school and high school band, orchestra, general music. Like, that's a whole other kind of gig, so I think being able to be successful in different situations, I think is really important especially for new teachers that are looking for their first job. And I think one of the other things that has just been such a great benefit to my experience is getting that hands-on experience, whether that's like, if we say, all right, students, we're going to meet every Saturday for the next month, and I'll bring the coffee and donuts, you bring your instrument, and we're just going to get a chance to conduct each other on the podium and just get some hands-on experience, so you kind of learn what to do, what not to do, and can, in a safe environment where you're like me, you're allowed to fail and fail a little bit better each time, and kind of learn from those kinds of things. So those are some of the most important things to me that the students get. Of course, we want them to be really good at what they do with the pedagogy, with their conducting, with their instrument knowledge and stuff like that. But I think it doesn't really matter until you get a chance to put the rubber to the road and really just try things out. I think that's one of the most important things to me.
Yeah, and one of the benefits from where you're at in a college town, and is that the locale of the students to the band hall, to coming in to see you, is so much easier than, let's say, when you were in Chicago, where people were commuting from an hour and a half away, and you never knew what traffic was going to be. And I mean, it was just crazy. So it's probably easier to gain a whole sense of community and allow and being able to have those experiences where you can come in and really spend more individual time with them and get to know them, and they get to work with each other. So that's great that you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of our strengths, I think.
Well, being from Chicago, I guess Green Bay, Chicago, that area, and having taught in Texas, which is, like we said, a whole nother world. There's the United States, and then there's Texas, and California is kind of out there too, but those are extreme opposites.
That's right.
Talk about the differences you've observed from those high school band days there, and maybe the bands that you see in Southeast Kansas and Southwest Missouri, and maybe even Northeast Oklahoma. Yeah,
well, there's definitely a certain culture in Southeast Kansas, or, we could just call it the 4-state area. You mentioned Oklahoma and Missouri, and a little bit of Arkansas is in our territory. There's a lot more small schools than there are really large schools in our area. So I think one of the big differences to me is the expectations in the program, expectations of the directors, or the expectations, just among the professionals. I think in our area, one of the things I really like about our region is that the expectation is to have a really good, positive musical experience for the students. Whereas in Texas, of course, that's always the bottom line. But in Texas, there's an expectation of excellence. That's kind of a bottom line, and you hope it doesn't become too much of an issue. But you hear of, like, all right, if you don't make a 1 at contest, then you're going to be replaced the next year by your administration. That's kind of like the negative side of things. But there's a lot of good that comes from that too. There's probably a lot more students that have done a lot, of good things because of that expectation, and it's just part of the culture. I think just because of our area, if we brought that same expectation to, let's say, a rural school in Southeast Kansas, you'd probably have, it'd be like teaching a pig to dance. It probably wouldn't be beneficial for anyone involved. It kind of like fits the culture, or, So I think the expectation of excellence versus the expectation of the experience is probably the biggest difference. And of course, everyone wants the best for their students, and it's just kind of depending on the culture and the profession and those kinds of things.
Yeah, excellence is has a whole different meaning in those smaller schools. And it's, like you said, your wife is a teacher in a school and she does the whole thing. I mean, a lot of those, man, they're like the music teacher for the whole district. And then they drive the bus and help prepare lunch. I mean, it's just like they're doing everything in those little towns. And it's amazing that they really are able to do as much as they can do. And they're great people. Just wonderful
that's
people.
Success. That's what success looks like. So if you have a concert and you have 30 students play a ukulele song, and you have another piece where another 30 students play a recorder song, and then they're singing and they're in the band. That's success right there. That's a win, definitely.
Absolutely. You mentioned when Mr. Hoover would go, he'd get a piece of paper and he'd crumble it up, put it on the floor. When you're invited to come to work a band, outside of helping them with their music and getting ready for a performance or a festival or whatever, what message does Andrew want to leave with those students? What thing do you want to impart with them that when it's all done, you left this big thing that they're got to ponder or think about? What is that?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to me, like the bottom line, is to let the students find ways to make them aware that they have a lot of creative, not control, but they're able to invest in the music probably a lot more than they think they can. To show them the depth of experience that is basically in any music, even in really boring parts. It depends on your creative investment. So if I can make students independent thinkers and make them aware that they have a big job actually to do, rather than just play their part. Their job is to be aware and to kind of know their part in the music. So, I was actually, this year I was able to do one clinic. We had to stay out of the schools for most of the year. Right at the end of the year, I was able to get out into a school, and it was fantastic. Of course, they were all distanced, they had masks, and it was just a pleasure to be able to work with them. And I can't remember the name of the piece. It was a Brian Balmage's piece, but I remember the flutes had a trill that lasted for about 32 measures, and you could just tell that they did not consider that a very important part, and they played it, and they were just counting till the rest. And one of the coolest things that I experienced there was to show them that, actually when you're trilling, there's several things that are happening around the band, like you might expect, and you shouldn't, as you're trilling, you might be complementing that thing in different ways. So it's not just a 32 measure trill, it's a dynamic trill that's doing different things. And you actually should be really listening, because if the trombones are playing a little bit louder one day, you need to be doing something different than if they're like missing a player one day. So it's actually a really active process. So that, I think, just that awareness of that you have a job beyond just playing your notes and rhythms, but you have a job as a musician. Every day you come to rehearsal, you better bring your A game. I think that's one of the most important things. And there's different ways that they can experience that.
You sound like Kevin Lepper.
Is that
right there? Because Kevin would always go, he'd always give people like a snare drum part and go like, okay, play the melody on the snare drum part. And he'd kind of have them do that. But yeah.
As you're saying that, I could picture him teaching that and moving around and the way he would say that. That's a very interesting comparison.
Yeah, you really raised a couple of great points just there. I mean, you remember when you were at Vandercook, I did a lot of clinics where people would bring their high school bands or middle school bands in. You work them for an hour or so, and the number of schools that when they would come in, and I would start asking the students when they started working on this music, and they would say, well, just before Christmas break or immediately after Christmas break, and now it's April or May, and they've been working on 3 pieces that entire time. And they're just bored to death with it. And they don't need a conductor. All they need is a starting pistol, because, they will go and they will just play the whole damn thing. And you're not going to change a whole lot. That concrete is pretty dry at that point. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to budge very much. And I came to the realization probably too late in my teaching career that those students don't know that they have an opportunity to think for themselves. I mean, they sit there and they got to be like, docile and ductile. And they, any instruction, any musical decision has to come from the podium, and they're there just to kind of push buttons and make a sound.
No, and it's so hard to work with students that are in that mode, right? Because it's hard to change concrete, right? To make any changes, you might say it and he's like, oh, okay. And they might even write it in their part. And of course, if you go back and play it, it'll probably sound very similar to what it did before. So it's almost like you have to find some way to break them out of that mold and to show them that there's flexibility. Of course, there's awareness and stuff like that. So yeah, that's any way you can break them out of that kind of snap them out of it. Because if they've been playing music for 5 months, either they're bored to tears, or sometimes you come to a clinic and they're just scared to death. They someone new coming in and they don't know what's going to happen, and they're just kind of playing scared. So either one of those situations, I think you got to just kind of snap them out of it. And then it's really cool to see the light bulb going. You mean I can like think and have ideas and try things and change things? Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
You got any funny stories to tell from working with those school bands? I'm sure you got some.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, just about every time. I mean, it's not so much any one experience, but every time it seems I go out into a school, I'm reminded of those little things about public school life that you just kind of forget about. Of course, you get down to this most nuanced little soft moment, and then would Mr. So-and-so please come to the office? Mr. So-and-so to the office. And it's like, come on, were you waiting for the most soft moment of the piece? Or, a student worker will come into the class. All right, we need every student born on an odd number day of the week whose hair starts with the color B for an emergency picture in the gymnasium. And then half the trombone section leaves. And okay, yes, this is what it's like. And those little things, that's like kind of a little bit of brings you back to public school education. It just kind of goes without fail every time. And you got to kind of chuckle, that's the reality there.
Oh, there's yeah, absolutely. We should just write a book on humorous things that happen. I remember I was doing a clinic for a high school band in a suburban place in Chicago. And I got up there and all of a sudden I look and there are no percussionists back there. They're all gone. We're on the stage. They're all gone, Andrew. And I'm going like, what in the heck? And so I just figured, well, they're going to get some equipment or something. I was working and I stop about 2 minutes later and I look up and they're eating pizza. They're eating pizza, right? So I turned to the director and I said, what's going on back there? And he goes, oh, Billy has a diabetes. And he says, he has to eat. And he says, has to eat so that, we're letting him eat. I said, well, what about the rest of those guys? And he turns to me and goes like, I don't know if they've got diabetes or not.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, he had no problem with them eating pizza while they're trying to rehearse. So
yeah, if there's pizza back there, then I guess it's a pizza party. That's all there is to it.
Oh man. Well, Andrew, in your bio, it mentioned that you're interested in the wind band repertoire of the 20th and 21st century, and I think that's awesome. So, who, in your opinion, are some of your favorite composers during this time? And I know, I don't want to. It's not an exclusive list. It's some people that are probably on the top of your head, and I could give you mine, but I don't want to give you mine. I want to hear yours. Who are some of your favorite composers?
Well, yeah. Well, before I say this, I just got to say, I got to put it in the context that I'm a saxophone player, and in our saxophone studio at Vandercook at the time, we were exposed to really out there, interesting new composers all the time. In fact, there's a music store in Chicago called Performers Music, and it's for those of you who don't. If you're in Chicago, you probably know what Performers Music. In fact, I'm not even sure if it's still there. It seemed like it shouldn't be, but you take a hand elevator. In other words, there's an elevator operator that takes you up to one of these floors, and you go into this little old building, and there's a music store, and in there's a guy named Lee, and that he's been there since dirt. And every time I went in there, Lee, I remember I got a saxophone piece once by Carol Husa, and Lee said, "Oh, you like modern composers?" I was like, "I guess so. This is what he told me to get." So Lee hands me a stack of about 5 pieces, all by composers I'd never heard of, all way out there, interesting sounds, like kind of like that's what saxophone players do. We're such a new instrument. So I started going there, and every month I went there, Lee says, "Hey, have you seen this piece?" I said, "No, I'll take it." And I kind of built up this little repertoire of pieces, and I kind of developed a love for just modern music and out there music, and that's kind of the thing that makes me excited. It's new things. What's fresh, what's new. So that's kind of like my context all throughout my career as a saxophone player. So I think some of that has kind of transferred over to the composers that I really think I love and that I'm really interested in. And that I really enjoy studying, in wind literature. I think for me, there's some composers that have like kind of defined what modern music is in wind literature, like Vincent Persichetti, Carol Husa, Joseph Schwantner, those composers that kind of like set the bar, for like, all right, here's what's possible, and of course they all played a really important part. Of course, Persichetti, we all know how important he was to, the wind ensemble and Eastman and all that stuff. And Carol Husa and Joseph Schwantner. I still think we're still kind of dealing with, the premiere of And the Mountains Rising Nowhere in 1977. We're still kind of trying to figure out how that fits, to this day. It's such interesting songs. But then I think one of my favorite things to do, or one of my, happiest moments in my career right now, are introducing students to new sounds, new composers, in a way that they feel like they're involved with the process. So these new young composers, and I'll give you some that we've played just this spring that I think our students were able to really connect with. And to me, that's the most important thing. Of course, you can play like really out there music and you can program it, but I think it's not a success unless the students are, all right, they buy into it, they're excited about it, and they enjoy performing it. So just this spring, some of the composers that I think are really have been enjoyed. Omar Thomas has been a great one for our students, especially the students of ours who are really into jazz. There's a lot of jazz musicians in our wind ensemble, so we get to do a lot of blues type things in his pieces, and I think just like the inspiration behind his music, I think really resonates with a lot of students. Of course, he's a young person. He's active on social media, and our students kind of connect with that. There's actually a really young composer named Troy Johnson, who's he's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm not sure where he is now. He's when I say young, I mean he must be in his 20s or early 30s, and our students really kind of connected with him for that reason too. And he's one of my proudest moments. I always try to get my students into the music, and we play a lot of Percy Grainger just because we love Percy Grainger at our one of our students remarked when we pulled out this piece by Troy Johnson. It's called Barbara Allen, which is a really beautiful setting of that folk song. The students remarked on how similar it was to kind of the way Percy Grainger set folk songs. It was not just a melody and accompaniment, but it was every part was very melodic. Every part was doing its own thing, but it was all kind of working together. And they kind of made that connection. I was like, wow, you guys are paying attention. And to have it done by a composer who's not much older than them, I think that's really important too. So I think those are some of the composers that are really resonating with our students today, doing their thing. They're active. Of course, it never hurts to have those composers email us and talk to us, on Facebook or whatever. That's always a plus.
Yeah, and the little video I watched, you were doing a John Mackey piece, and
yeah.
He's really contributed a lot. Of course,
absolutely.
Mackey, to Kelly, all those people, Michael Doherty, love those people. We just love those people.
You have to. And John Mackey's another one that, our students would like send him a friend request on Facebook, and it blows their minds when he accepts their friend request and, sends them a message. And he's really good about those kinds of things, making those little connections with students.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because in your role as a college band director, you're also a resource, and every once in a while you'll get a phone call or an email from a director whose band probably plays at maybe the grade 3 or grade 4 level, and they say, hey, we're getting ready for a contest. You got any suggestions for me? And I'm sure you're like the rest of us, that you have some composers that you say, hey, go and listen to these guys. Who are these guys for you? Yeah,
definitely. I think like knowing really good grade 3 and 4 music, that's kind of like the holy grail for educational bands, right? You have to know pieces that are going to fit your group, that are going to be a home run and worth your time and worth your effort, especially if you're going to spend a long time on a piece. So I think that's super important. So yeah, I've actually I've learned a lot of new grade 3 pieces. That's been kind of one of my goals this year. One of the pieces that we actually played at KMEA this year, we had a lot of constrictions, as you might imagine. This past year, weren't able to rehearse very long. We had to, spread out and mask. So we kind of had to find some pieces that we can make work in that new scenario. And one of them is the one I've not seen played before. It's by Julie Giroux. It's called Before the Sun, and it's a grade 3 piece. but it's a violin solo with wind ensemble accompaniment, and it's a beautiful grade 3 piece. It's just such a emotional piece, and it's beautiful, and it's relatively straightforward, and works like that. Like whenever I find a grade 3 work that's like great music, fits well, it checks all those boxes, that's gold to me. So I don't take credit for finding these things. Actually, it was one of my students that found that work. So one of my greatest ideas this year was in my methods of teaching class. We had a Google Doc that was a database, and I said, all right, for my 10 or 12 methods of teaching students, I said, every week you're going to find 5 brand new pieces and put them in this Google Doc, and we're all going to put them in the same doc, and we're going to share them all together. You're going to put the title, composer, grade level, have a link to the recording, all this information. And I tell you what, I found more great pieces through them doing the legwork than I ever found on my own. So that I found that Giroux piece that way. I found a lot of new composers thanks to my students. I guess credit to my students. Another one that I found from my students is Kimberly Archer, a composer I had never really come across before. She does a lot of, grade 2, 3, 4 stuff. And she's one of those composers that's like, it's educational music, but it's not, once some composers, once you've heard one of their pieces, you've heard basically all of them, and it's what to expect. She's got some new sounds that music that I would actually be interested in listening to. I think there's one that's a grade 3 called Awakenings, or something with an A. I think it's Awakenings. This is an interesting piece of music. I'm enjoying listening to this. Another one is Jody Blackshaw. Not only because of her music, but because of the educational component. She's so involved in creating educational experiences for the students, and she will happily Zoom in with your ensemble or send you notes. But a lot of her pieces have educational lessons kind of incorporated into the piece. There's one I haven't played, but I've heard through my students called 13 Moons, which is a piece that's very flexible. You can do 1 out of 4 movements, or you can do all 4 movements. I think you can even switch around the order based on what your students want to do. But that piece incorporates student composition and student improvisation, and those little points, the NAFME standards that we don't always hit very frequently in our ensembles. It's kind of built into the piece, and she kind of gives all these resources, and I think that's just fantastic, and it's a great way to bring your students into those kind of experiences. Of course, there's other composers like Randall Standridge, Brian Balmages, Frank DeKelly that are just going to be successful. If those pieces are going to make your ensemble sound good, they're doubled in all the right ways, and they're scored in such a way that it's going to be just a good musical experience. Especially if you have incomplete instrumentation or things like that. So those are the kind of composers that I steer people to, just that are going to create good musical experiences.
Right. The cool thing is you just led off with 3 female composers. Did you know that?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And again, credit to my students. Those are the people that they're seeking out. Those are the people that are really interesting. And I think there's some really great things happening now if we just kind of like know where to look. And I think that's the key. You kind of find what you're looking for.
Yep. Get some new voices in the repertoire world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've purposely avoided this question, but we're coming out of the pandemic, and you mentioned that you had to teach during the pandemic. And so as you look at school band directors right now to get their programs back on track and get their students up and going, you got any advice for them?
Yeah. And I think this is such a crucial time for us as we kind of get back into things. It's kind of, I think one of the things that we don't want to do is try to bring things back to exactly where they were beforehand. We probably missed some instruction. We probably had students who, maybe haven't been practicing as much as they normally would in a normal situation. So I think one of the most important things to accomplish as we go back is to help students remember why they are in our programs, help them remember why they are participating in music, and why they're spending all this time and energy doing this activity. It's of course we want to get them back and get their chops back into shape, get those lessons learned, get them moving, through their development. But I think, if there's nothing else that we accomplish when we bring students back, is to make sure that we have some life-changing musical moments that happen every rehearsal, even non-musical experiences, right? Just the culture things, the camaraderie things, those things that we've been missing out on, and that students probably desperately want and need to get back. We need to make sure that we are first and foremost having that as our bottom line, and then through those experiences, through the music, then we can start to teach them and start to bring them along and start to, develop their skills and those kinds of things. But I think it's important to kind of have the priorities straight there.
That's great advice. When you were at Vandercook, was Dr. Hall there, Michael Hall, the violist?
He was, yeah, and actually he's one of those very active social media users. So I feel like I've never lost contact with him because he's just that active of a performer and educator. But yeah, he was there, and I remember learning a lot from him, even though he was a string teacher and I didn't really take a lot of classes from him. But there's definitely a unique presence there on the faculty. Is he still there?
Yeah, he's still there. I think he's still there. But we used to have wonderful conversations about the fact that when people warm up an ensemble, they warm up a band, they warm up an orchestra, whatever they do, that they never put it into some sort of emotional context, right? B flat major scale, here we go. Right? It's like that kind of thing. And we don't play it joyfully, or we don't play it sour with sorrow, or we don't, we don't take our warm-ups and we don't put a musical context to them. And he was really big on doing that. Have you ever thought about that? Has anybody ever talked about that during your study?
Probably. I and it's been a while, and I'm sure it's happened throughout, and I think it's one of those things that I've had the benefit of having the experience of in the ensembles that I've been in. Of making sure that you're playing with musical intent every time you pick up your horn, and even people like I remember going back to Vandercook, one of the best things there was I was an usher for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and I got to see a lot of things that went on there and talk to people that I would never normally get to talk to. And I think people, some of the great performers that I got to see there, Charlie Vernon, Gene Percorni, Dale Clevenger, every time you pick up your instrument, playing with musical intention. Every time you do anything, it's got a musical intention behind it. There's not mindless, it's not rote, it's got some kind of intention. And I think that's so important. And I think that's something you can do with beginners. Beginners, whether you're just playing on your mouthpiece, trying to play a higher buzz, lower buzz, whatever the case may be, there's some kind of intention there. And I think that's a great habit to build, and warm up is a great time to do that.
Okay, a couple of final quick questions here. I guess
right.
They may be quick, they may not be quick. You'll be determined.
I'll be the judge of that.
So, what's the best lesson you ever learned throughout your career so far?
Well, I think I've played a lot of notes when I've been in bands, and I've had some good performances and maybe some not as good performances. But I think the thing that I'm taking with me from all my past experience is the experience that I've had. I think the experience that our students have in our programs is the thing that they take with them, whether they become musicians or whether they go on to do another profession. I don't know why they would, but I guess there's other professions that students choose. I think the experience that they have in our programs is probably the most important thing that our students can take with them.
Okay, you get to go to a desert island with 3 compositions. What are you taking with you?
Okay. Well, this is a hard one. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go first of all, Mahler Symphony No. 3, because back when I had my first car, it's when we still had CD players in our car, and that was a CD I had in my car, and right early on in my car, my CD player broke to where I could not eject the CD. So I had a Mahler Symphony No. 3 CD in my car for most have been years. So that's what I listened to driving around, is that symphony. I think it was the Boston Symphony Orchestra. So I've probably heard that piece, 100 times just driving around throughout the year. So I think if I haven't gotten sick of that piece by now, then I think that'd be a good desert island piece. Let's see, something from the wind music category. I'd probably pick Winds of Nagal by Michael Colgrass, just because that is such an interesting piece in that it tells such a clear story. There's so many different things happening. It's so full of character. There's so many different parts to it that are just like, different adventures, different things happening. I think that just like the entertainment value and the musical value, I think I think you get a lot of bang for your buck from Winds of Nagal. And I guess anything by Thelonious Monk. I don't know if you'd consider that a composition, but I could probably listen to Thelonious Monk play piano all day long, whether he was with John Coltrane or with a band or just by himself. I think that would knock it. Let's just hope it never comes to pass that I have to pick three pieces. But I think those would be good choices.
You mentioned Winds of Nagual. I think that is the cornerstone piece in the last 50 years. I think there's a lot of great pieces out there, but I think that one just is like, whoa, that one opened up so many doors and windows and eyes and sounds, and man, it just brought things to life.
It's so hard to tell, right? We get the benefit of hindsight, what's going to be a cornerstone work, but like as it gets closer and closer to the present time, it's hard to tell. But I think, 1980s, that's about when we could say, all right, this is going to be probably 50 years down the road. Absolutely.
Okay, you got the opportunity to meet and talk with any composer in history, living or dead. Who would it be, and what do you want to talk to him about?
Well, that's a good question. I think maybe not even for musical reasons, but just because I think he'd be a really interesting guy to have a conversation with if he could speak English, would be Mozart. And I don't know if that he would even be, he's such a natural composer and musician. He might not even be very interesting to talk to about music. He'd probably just say, yeah, you just do it. You just jot it off. But I think, first of all, I think Mozart would be a great person to have a conversation with. Maybe go ahead and have a beer and just see what kinds of things he likes to talk about. And B, I think if I could show him a saxophone, I think he would really like that instrument, and I think we'd have some great saxophone concertos written by Mozart if he knew about that. So I'm going old school. Spoken
like a true saxophone player. God bless you, man. I'm telling you what. There are people listening to this podcast that are just like screaming right now because they're all saxophone players. And you think Mozart would be into the electronic music and computers and all that stuff?
Well, that's a great question, and I think he would. I think he would. I think he would be right in line with that. I think we have some Mozart beats coming down the line if he knew about that kind of thing.
Mozart beats. That's perfect. That's perfect. Andrew, this has been so much fun. You got any final thoughts you want to share with us?
I guess not other than that we've talked about. Other than I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how things evolve, and you hear phrases like the new normal or pre-COVID or post-COVID, and your eyes just kind of glaze over. But I think it's such an important time in our profession. Certain things that whenever you're forced to change something, I think that's always an opportunity for growth. And I'm really excited and curious to see what happens, how we move forward. Of course, certain things are going to be probably better that we've taken from those. Certain things we're going to be dropped, like like we hope to never see again. But I think it's definitely going to be different, and it's definitely going to be kind of exciting to watch as it unfolds. And I guess I'm just going to be curious, just like everyone else, kind of how we move forward.
Well, as a guy that had the privilege to have you as a student somewhere along the way, and I'm glad I didn't ruin you too bad. I'm just really damn proud of you, buddy, and keep up the great work. And hopefully we'll get through this, and I'll be able to see you maybe at the Midwest Clinic this year or sometime before. And I wish you the best. I'm so damn proud of you, and keep her going, buddy. Okay. I'll see you down the road.
Will do. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Andrew Chybowski is a double sharp young man, and I believe he is fortunate to have understood that he needed to find his own voice and do what he believes is the right thing to do at a young age. Of course, we're always in search of finding out who we are, but just to have that realization that the need exists is so vitally important to our success. To have had a student of Andrew's ability, dedication, drive, musicianship, humor, and humanity is something that humbles me as a teacher more than anyone will ever know. And Andrew, the next time we get together, I'll bring the donuts and we can talk about the fun of being a band director. And hopefully there won't be one of those office announcements to disrupt our time together. Congratulations, young man. You have a long and promising career ahead of you. Know that I am proud of you, and I wish you a long and prosperous ride. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. I'll be back with more great conversations. And as always, please tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So until the next time, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.